vast expanse of space, cold and indifferent, stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced windows of the Odysseus. Captain Marlowe stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the anomaly that had arrested their journey. It was a comet, its surface glistening with a luminous, sickly green hue that defied explanation. It pulsed, almost imperceptibly, as if it were a living thing, inhaling and exhaling in the still void. "Captain, initial scans are complete." The voice of Dr. Elena Voss, the ship's xenobiologist, crackled over the comms. She appeared on the monitor, her face half illuminated in the sterile glow of her lab. "Composition is mostly ice and rock, as expected, but there's something else, a biological signature." Marlowe's brow furrowed. "Biological? On a comet?" "Confirm that, Doctor." Dr. Voss's eyes darted off-screen, skimming data. "It's faint, but it's there. We need samples to analyze further." The decision, laden with unspoken risk, was made swiftly. Protocol dictated exploration, even when every instinct screamed otherwise. A team was assembled, suited in biohazard gear, and dispatched to gather material from the comet's surface. Through the observation deck's glass, Marlowe watched them disembark, their forms shrinking to ants against the comet's formidable mass. The retrieval process was routine at first, drills biting into the crust, containers filling with frigid shards. But then a slight tremor rippled across the comet's surface. The green glow intensified, bathing the team in its eerie light. "Captain, there's movement in the readings," a voice from Mission Control reported, tinged with a barely suppressed tremor. The tremor ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving only a disquieting stillness. The team returned, containers sealed and locked away in the ship's laboratory. Marlowe exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to the viewing screen where Dr. Voss now stood, staring at the frost-caked specimens with fascination and a flicker of unease. Hours passed. The crew fell into their routines, though the tension lingered, taut and whisper-thin. It was Ensign Richter who first showed symptoms. He was alone in the engine room when the itching began. He thought little of it at first, brushing it off as irritation from the insulation. But by the time he reported for his next shift, dark, vein-like lines had begun to creep along his arms. He wore a strained smile, his skin glistening with sweat. "Ensign, are you all right?" asked Lieutenant Darrow, eyeing Richter warily. "Just tired," Richter mumbled, but his eyes darted nervously. "Probably nothing." It wasn't nothing. The veins thickened, darkening to an almost black shade. Richter's breathing grew labored. Panic seized him as he scratched frantically at the grotesque patterns now visible beneath his skin, revealing fibrous growths that felt impossibly alive. They pulsed under his fingers, exuding a foul-smelling dark fluid that spread across the floor like an oil spill. An alarm sounded, summoning the medical team. Captain Marlowe rushed into the chaos, eyes wide as he took in the scene. Richter's screams tore through the ship, raw and primal. Dr. Voss, clad in her medical gear, pushed past Marlowe and bent over the writhing ensign, injecting a sedative that finally stilled his flailing limbs. The silence that followed was suffocating. "We need a quarantine," Voss said, voice clipped as she wiped her brow. "Whatever this is, it's no ordinary pathogen." A chill settled over the crew. The comet, so beautiful in its alien glow, now felt like a harbinger of something ancient and insidious. As the ship's internal sensors scanned for contamination, A single jarring thought settled in the captain's mind. They had brought something back with them, and it was only beginning to wake. The sterile hum of the ship's ventilation system, once an unnoticed backdrop to life aboard the Odysseus, now carried an insidious resonance. It was as if the entire ship whispered a secret only it understood. Captain Marlowe stood on the bridge, eyes bloodshot from a restless night. Ensign Richter had been isolated in the medical bay, but his condition haunted them all, his skin laced with dark veins, motionless except for the occasional shudder. The captain turned as Dr. Elena Voss entered, her steps hurried and face marked with exhaustion. "I need to speak with you," she said, glancing nervously at the others on the bridge. "Privately." In his office, Marlowe waited for Voss to speak. She set a small vial on the desk, filled with a viscous, dark substance that glistened with an unnatural luster. "This came from Richter's blood sample," she began, voice tight. "Under the microscope, it's not just a growth. It's a network, like neurons firing and connecting. It's communicating." Marlowe's stomach tightened. Communicating? With what? Voss shook her head. "I don't know, but it's spreading faster than we anticipated. I ran atmospheric scans. Spores have infiltrated the air system. It's not confined to Richter anymore." A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the rhythmic clinking of the vial as it trembled slightly on the desk. The implications were clear. They were all at risk. The next day, crew members began showing subtle signs of infection. First, it was simple things: red, irritated eyes, moments of distraction. Then it escalated. Engineer Marquez stopped mid-sentence in the cafeteria, a tray clattering from her hands as she clawed at her temples. "Something's under my skin," she screamed, eyes wide with terror. A dark, webbed pattern began creeping from her hairline down to her neck, pulsing in sync with her racing heartbeat. Chaos ensued. Crew members stumbled away from Marquez, eyes darting nervously as if expecting the affliction to leap at them. Panic spread like wildfire through the confined space of the ship. Captain Marlowe ordered immediate lockdowns and air filtration measures, but they knew it was too late. The infected soon shared a commonality, a vacant, glassy look, as if listening to something far away. Conversations became fractured, punctuated by moments of staring into nothingness. Marlowe himself felt a faint, nagging pressure at the back of his mind, like a half-formed thought that couldn't be grasped. Dr. Voss worked tirelessly in the medical bay, dissecting tissue samples taken from the afflicted. Under the sterile glow of her lab's lights, she watched in horror as fibrous tendrils twisted and intertwined, creating tiny, quivering webs. They pulsed, responding to each other, moving as if choreographed by an unseen conductor. The sound came next. It started as a whisper, barely audible, a low, droning hum that resonated deep in their bones. At first, the crew dismissed it as fatigue-induced hallucinations, the byproduct of sleepless nights and strained nerves. But when Lieutenant Darrow woke in the middle of the sleep cycle, drenched in sweat, he knew it was more. The voice echoed inside him, speaking a language without words. "Join us. Guide us." By the following morning, it was clear to Marlowe that they were facing a sentient force, one that understood their biology, their fears, and most chillingly, their minds. Crew members gathered in hushed groups, eyes darting suspiciously at their peers, each person wondering if the others could hear it too. The infected no longer struggled. They sat quietly, their faces serene, unified by an unseen thread that bound them together. Those still unaffected became the minority, eyes wide and wild with panic. Captain Marlowe convened a final meeting, the bridge now half empty. Options, he asked, though he knew there were none. Dr. Voss stood, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. "It wants Earth," she whispered. "Whatever it is, whatever it's doing to us, it's using us to guide it home." The realization struck Marlowe like a blow. The mission had changed. Their new objective was survival, not just for themselves, but for the billions who unknowingly awaited their return. Yet, as the voice grew stronger, more insistent, a sliver of doubt burrowed into his mind. Would any of them have the strength to resist its call? The sound was no longer just a whisper. It had evolved into a symphony of dread, a droning chant that resonated from the bowels of the ship to the deepest recesses of each crew member's mind. Captain Marlowe sat in his chair on the dimly lit bridge, hands clamped over his ears. It was useless. The voice bypassed the physical, vibrating inside his skull, a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Lieutenant Darrow stood stiffly by the navigation console, eyes wide, mouth moving silently as if reciting a prayer. But there was no god listening in the void. Marlowe glanced at him and saw that dark tendrils had begun to rise beneath the lieutenant's skin, forming the now familiar patterns that marked the infected. The captain's own arms itched, but he forced himself not to look, not to confirm the inevitable. Dr. Voss entered, her gait unsteady. She dropped a stack of tablets onto the nearest surface, scattering data that no longer mattered. "It's communicating," she said, her voice hollow. "Not just with itself, but with us. It's trying to guide us, to coordinate our course." Marlowe met her gaze, reading the resignation there. "Are you saying it's conscious?" She nodded, eyes dark and shadowed. "And it's not just conscious. It's aware. It's aware of us as extensions of itself. Each of us is a cell, a nerve, in its growing body." A sudden crash erupted behind them. Engineer Marquez, veins bulging like black rivers beneath her skin, slammed her fist into a control panel, shattering glass and spraying sparks. Her eyes glistened with a wet, alien light. "We need to go home," she whispered, and a chorus of whispers followed, echoed by those around her. "Home. Earth." Marlowe's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped back, watching in horror as more crew members began to chant. Their voices layered atop the persistent hum, building to a collective chorus that filled the room. The bridge transformed from a place of command to a temple of something monstrous, something that had them all under its sway. "Voss," he gasped, the sound struggling to find space in the cacophony. "We can't let it reach Earth. You know what that means." She nodded slowly, understanding the implication, but her expression shifted, flickering between grief and defiance. "There's one chance. If we overload the core." A sudden, sharp pain pierced Marlowe's temples, silencing her words. The voice surged in his mind, louder and more demanding. "Guide us. Spread." The pain subsided, leaving a dull throb in its place, but it was enough to stagger him. He clutched at the edge of the console, breathing hard. Around him, crew members dropped to their knees, heads bowed as if in worship. Their faces, lined with dark, pulsing veins, glistened with sweat and something more. Acceptance. Darrow's eyes snapped to Marlowe, and for a moment, the captain saw the man's old self, terrified and pleading. "Captain," Darrow whispered, "I can't fight it anymore." His hands, now mottled with the dark network, moved to the controls with a mechanical precision. Alarms blared as the ship shifted course. The engines rumbled to life, recalibrating their trajectory toward Earth. "No!" Marlowe surged forward, but the chant crescendoed, a deafening command that reverberated in his bones. He froze, every muscle locked in place by a will not his own. He could see Voss trying to fight it too, her fingers twitching toward a console only to pull back, her eyes wide and glistening. "Captain," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's too strong." The voice, now a roar, pushed aside every thought, every fragment of self. Marlowe's vision blurred as he felt himself slipping, a sensation akin to drowning, until there was nothing but the vast alien presence, filling him, guiding him. Around him, the crew moved as one, their actions synchronized like the limbs of a single creature. "Guide us. Spread." In that final, fleeting moment of clarity, Marlowe knew that their last act of defiance had to come now or never. He locked eyes with Dr. Voss, who nodded weakly, understanding what he could not say aloud. With the last shred of his will, Marlowe reached for the emergency override and slammed his fist down. A countdown began, a warning that barely registered in the din. The bridge filled with frantic movement, but he felt none of it. The voice faltered, stuttering as if surprised, then roared in a fury that shook the walls. Voss stumbled to the ground, a smile ghosting her lips, lips that mouthed, "Thank you." The ship quaked, the lights surged, and in a flash of searing, silent light, the voice was silenced forever. The Odysseus drifted through the vacuum, its hull fractured and scorched. Inside, the ship was a graveyard of shattered controls and overturned chairs, strewn with the remnants of the crew's final moments. The emergency lights pulsed with the beat of a dying heart, casting the corridors in alternating bands of crimson and shadow. In that stuttering glow, the ship was both still and alive, haunted by echoes of what had been. Captain Marlowe's hand hovered over the communication console, fingers trembling as he initiated the final transmission. His breath came in ragged gasps, each inhalation laced with the iron tang of blood. The countdown had stalled with seconds to spare, fate's cruel joke. The voice had quieted, reduced to a distant rhythmic hum, like the memory of a storm. But Marlowe knew it wasn't gone. Not entirely. It lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when the fight in them faltered. Around him, the bridge was a scene of frozen chaos. Lieutenant Darrow lay crumpled near the navigation console, eyes open but unseeing, veins still etched black beneath his pallid skin. Engineer Marquez sat slumped against the wall, lips parted in a silent scream, her hands reaching for something they'd never grasp. And in the center of it all, Dr. Voss knelt by the shattered remains of the command chair, her body motionless except for the slight rise and fall of her chest. Marlowe's gaze met hers, and in the thin sliver of light that danced across her face, he saw the fierce glint of defiance that had kept them alive this long. She managed a weak nod. This had to be done. They both knew it was their last warning to Earth. He swallowed, the dryness in his throat scraping like sandpaper. The words came haltingly at first, weighed down by the knowledge of what he was about to do. "This is Captain Elias Marlowe of the Odysseus," he began, voice cracking with the effort. The transmission signal blinked, struggling to hold. "We have encountered an organism, an intelligence, a parasite that thrives in the deep void. It infiltrates, adapts, and binds. It speaks." He paused, head pounding as the residual hum swelled, rebelling against his act of will. Marlowe shut his eyes, forcing himself to continue. It seeks not just to consume us, but to spread, to use us as its vessels. We are already lost. The spores, they speak as one, and they command us. They will use us to find you. Dr. Voss's voice broke through the static, a rasp that still carried her resolve. If you receive this transmission, you must act. Destroy the comet. Destroy anything that approaches. Do not let us near Earth. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled through the speakers, and Marlowe's hand spasmed involuntarily. The hum surged, clawing at his mind, an angry tide trying to drown him. His vision blurred as if a shadow swept across his consciousness. The voice spoke, no longer an ominous chant, but a raw, invasive presence that pushed against the boundaries of his will. You are ours. We are many. Marlowe's body stiffened as the voice coiled around his thoughts, twisting them like a marionette's strings. His free hand rose of its own accord, fingers tightening around a shard of shattered glass on the console. He fought it, the sweat and blood mixing on his brow as he struggled to keep control. The last sparks of himself flickered, the memories of blue skies, laughter, and the warmth of Earth splintering under the weight of an alien will. The countdown resumed, triggered by a failsafe Voss had managed to program in the final moments. The display read 0010, and for an instant, silence swept through the ship. The hum faltered, sensing the shift. Voss used that moment, eyes blazing as she met Marlowe's gaze. "Captain," she whispered, voice steady despite the tremor of her limbs. "Make them listen." Summoning everything left of himself, Marlowe drew a ragged breath. The transmission crackled and he leaned close, face pale but determined. "This is not a warning, it's a plea. End it. End us. Before it's too late. 103, 102. The final second ticked, and the voice shrieked, an otherworldly howl of rage that echoed through every crevice of the ship. The countdown reached 0, and in that heartbeat of absolute silence, Marlowe felt an unexpected calm. The hum stopped, silenced by the ship's core implosion. Light engulfed them, a searing burst that swallowed all sound, all thought, and in its embrace the voice was obliterated. The transmission flickered one last time, beamed across the cosmos toward Earth, carrying with it the final testament of the Odysseus and its crew. A reminder that even in the face of unspeakable horror, there are those who will fight to the end, not just for themselves, but for everyone they leave behind. Static filled the receiver on Earth, a final trembling echo that whispered silence, before cutting out for good.